Beth Moore has a saying about the South. She says that in the South we have relationships a mile wide and an eighth of an inch deep. I've lived in Hendersonville actually my whole life, and I lived in Boston for about 4 years. And there's definitely something different about the cultures. And I think that that statement is true, because in the South we have a tendency to live life in such a way, and it's not necessarily negative, it's just different, that to form deep and meaningful relationships is a little more difficult. But it's real easy to keep a good surface level thing going on with our neighbors. And I want to look at what Jesus has to say about that this morning, and what maybe God can do in my life and in your life to make loving our neighbors just a little different for us this morning. When I was asked to teach on how to love your neighbor, I got to thinking about all the mission trips that I've done, all the service projects, all the one-day service things that we've done, all the teenagers that Sal and I had the opportunity to minister to when I was a youth pastor, and now with the young adults and working with a couple of women's small groups. And I thought, loving your neighbor is not going to be a problem for me to talk about. I've been doing ministry for about 12, 13 years now. This is going to be, when John said, well, I don't want you to talk about neighbors while I'm out of town, I thought, I got this. And then I read the Bible. So let's look at Luke chapter 10 together. Someone asked me why I still have the coffee cup. I told them that's my iPad. And then someone said, you hold it whenever you speak, but you don't ever drink out of it. And I said, I don't know why I do that. I said, I'm sorry. And then someone else came up to me and said, what's really in there? I promise it's coffee, maybe, with some kind of creamer. All right, so Luke chapter 10, starting in verse 25. Just then a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he said, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And he said to him, what is written in the law? What do you read there? He answered, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, you have given the right answer. Do this and you will live. But wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? And Jesus replied with a parable. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers, who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him. When he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper and said, take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? And the expert in the law said, the one who showed him mercy. Go and do likewise, Jesus said. When I read this passage, probably I would guess one of the most famous passages about how to love your neighbor. And when I read this, I feel fairly confident. Well, I've done that. I've helped people that other people have wanted to cast aside. I mean, Sal and I have gone to Guatemala and served for a week in an orphanage. And we've given money to causes. We've given to invisible children. We've given to issues such as sex trafficking, even here in Sumner County. I mean, we have wanted to help the people that doesn't seem like many people really want to help. But verse 37 has been weighing on me the last couple of weeks as I've thought about sharing with you. Let's look at that verse one more time. Verse 37 says, and he said, this is the expert in the law, said to Jesus, when Jesus says, who is this that did this well? Out of these 3, the priest, the Levite, and the Samaritan, who did this correctly? And the expert in the law says, the one who showed mercy. And that verse has really stuck with me this week. See, I want to encourage you to volunteer at your local food pantry. I want to encourage you to get involved in homeless ministry. And these are our neighbors. Everyone that you encounter in the Hendersonville community and the Nashville area, these are your neighbors. But this morning, I want to look at maybe those that aren't so easy to show mercy to. Maybe the ones that frustrate you. Just a little history about the Jews and the Samaritans, and maybe you've heard this before, but if you haven't, I just want you to understand the extreme that comes between these 2 cultures. So the Samaritans considered themselves the true Israel, that they had the original Pentateuch, which is the first 5 books of the Bible, and they actually got the correct one. They had their own temple, their own book, and they felt like they were the lost tribes of Israel. They were the correct Israel. And the Jews did not agree. They felt like they were the correct Israel. So leaders in both groups expressly taught that you are not to talk to the other group. You're not to talk to them. In fact, you're not even to go into each other's territory, which is why repeatedly in the Gospels we see Jesus interacting with Samaritans, and it's a big deal. It's a big deal because they have been raised to not do that. So when Jesus interacts with a Samaritan woman, or in this parable when the Samaritan is the one who does life well, who loves well, let me put it in today's context. I want you in your mind right now to get that person that drives you crazy. Hopefully they're not sitting by you. I want you, don't tell them, keep this in your mind. It's just a mental thing we're doing, okay? Don't say it out loud. Don't raise your hand. I'm not going to call on you. I'm not going to let you say it. Get in your mind that person in your office that drives you crazy. Maybe it's your boss. Maybe it's an employee. Get in your mind that neighbor. Maybe it's an actual neighbor. You live in a neighborhood and there's that one neighbor that makes all that noise and causes all that problem. Get them in your head. Maybe it's someone you go to school with. You may have to actually go back to kind of last week and pull some thoughts from your family. Think about that person that drives you crazy. They've wounded you. They frustrate you. And imagine sitting down with Jesus and Jesus says to you, they love people better than you. I don't know about you guys, but that would sting me. Jesus has to look at me and say, you mean the people that I feel like have hurt me and have frustrated me, the people that I have decided to put to the side, they love other people better than me? It's an awakening. It's something that happens in us when we're called to give mercy to people that we don't want to give mercy to. See, it's easy for me to give mercy to people that I'm going to see for a week and then I get to go home. It's easy for me to give mercy to people that I just encounter for 5 minutes in the grocery store. But Jesus is asking me to give mercy to the very people that I don't want anything to do with for various reasons. And that's a challenge. I want to look this morning at all the different reasons that we struggle to love our neighbors. So I'm just going to kind of go down. Basically, I'm going to tell you the reasons I struggle to love my neighbors, and I hope some of you can relate at some point. The first reason for me, to be honest, is we're busy. Life is busy. When Sal and I lived in a subdivision, we knew all of our neighbors because we'd be out in the yard and they had kids or we had kids, and everybody would be out in the yard doing something, and so we would meet them. But then we moved, and we moved to 5-acre tracts. There's like 4 of them around us. And so all of our neighbors are, they're not like miles away, but they're far away enough that you have to actually make some effort to go and meet them. So we've been in this house for 6 years. Now, I have a dentist that lives behind me. He's very nice. We've met each other while we were working in the yard. I've got these guys over here to my right. They're very nice. He's retired, and he's come over and said hi. We've been working in the yard. But there is this one neighbor I have that I have never seen in 6 years. It's like a scene from the movie The Burbs, if you've ever seen Tom Hanks' movie. It's like, are they even in there? At one point, there was actually a fire over there in one of their outbuildings, and I thought, they still weren't outside. Like, where are these people? And so when John said, I want you to share on neighbors, I thought, I've never met my neighbor. That's pretty bad. So I told myself for this last 3 weeks that I was going to go and meet those neighbors, just to introduce myself, to apologize for being a horrible neighbor, to say, hi, I've lived here for 6 years. If you've ever needed anything, I have not been there. And, I hope if you need anything now you can come, but probably we won't be home because we're never home because we feel like we never stop. I just wanted to introduce myself. So every day for 3 weeks, I have told myself I'm going to go and meet my neighbor. Yesterday, I was like, today's probably going to have to be the day. And it's not that I don't want to meet my neighbor. I have nothing against my neighbor. I'm not scared of my neighbor. I'm not bothered by my neighbor, but it's literally, I have not stopped. I have a 7, 8-year-old boys. They play baseball. They're in piano, which they love that I make them take piano lessons. It just feels like life doesn't stop. I work. My husband works. We're obviously slightly involved in church. It just doesn't stop. And it's not that I don't want to meet my neighbor, but life is busy. So yesterday I woke up and I said, well, today's got to be the day because I'm going to share with you guys. And then I woke up, and then my younger son wanted to have like a special Mother's Day breakfast, kind of, because I have to work on Mother's Day. And so we were eating breakfast, and then we had to go pick up our other son from a sleepover, and then we had to go do this, and then we had to go do that. It just didn't stop. Part of the reason I think we miss life or we miss impacting our neighbors is because we're busy. We are so busy. We have to slow down. A good friend of mine, Amy Goodwin, she always says, Jen, are you making room in your life to be interrupted? Do you have space in your life that if your neighbors actually stop by your house, you could stop and ask how they are? That you could invite them in? It's funny, culture actually kind of shows this pattern. You can do a study of porches and see the way that our culture has changed. 50 years ago, the main place to be was the front porch. Big porches with chairs on the front porch. And everybody sat out there and you could just walk by and you could see them and you'd wave and you knew everybody's name. Now, if you look at newer houses, teeny tiny front porches, massive backyards with privacy fences. Our culture goes at such a pace that when we come home, we're exhausted and we just want sanctuary. We just want to rest. We just want to be. So we make that huge investment in the backyard because it's kind of a place of sanity, and we build these big fences. And I'm not saying anything bad about big fences. I really need a big fence. But it just speaks to the fact that sometimes we're just too busy to love our neighbors and we're missing it. The other reason I think we struggle to love our neighbors is because we don't think we have to. Really, do they need us? What's the big deal? And you don't. You don't have to. But I do a lot of pastoral counseling here at the church, and one of the things I see often, I'm going to say 9 out of 10, when someone comes into my office 9 out of 10 times and they're struggling with feeling depressed, they're struggling with anxiety, they're struggling with just their worth, their value, their purpose, 9 times out of 10 I can ask them if they're doing anything for anybody else, and the answer will be no. See, there's something that happens in our spiritual walk and in our emotional and our psychological health that when we pour out and we impact our neighbors or our family or our world, we get out of our world for just a second. Part of my Mother's Day treat to myself was I got a massage Friday. So I'm laying there, I actually fell asleep. It was embarrassing. And when she was done, she said, was that good? And I was like, yes, that was wonderful. And I said, but what I wish is that you could massage my thoughts. That you could actually get them to calm down, that you could get them to slow down. What actually will stop my thoughts is when I stop thinking about myself and actually calm down enough to invest in someone else. If I want to make an impact in my neighbors' lives, it's going to impact me as well. It's part of what we're doing even with this 100 days. The other reason that we're busy, we don't think that we have to, it's not needed, we also think that it isn't worth our time. And Pastor Mark is so good about reminding his students consistently, you want to leave a legacy. You want to leave a legacy. You want to leave a legacy. And the only thing that lasts forever, even though for some of us it's the very last thing we think to do, is to impact another life. It's the only thing that lasts forever. Our finances will fade. Our material stuff will fade. But if you choose to love a neighbor especially, not that loving your family isn't valuable, but you have to understand when we're stuck with family, we don't have a choice sometimes. Obviously we can still make choices, but with your neighbor, when you choose to love someone, I've had people that have ministered to me and they didn't have to. They've invested in me and they didn't have to. And that's impacted me forever. My mom has to deal with me. Lord bless you, Mama. My grandmother has to deal with me. But when you deal with someone you don't have to deal with and you do so in a loving way and you pour out your energy and your effort, it lasts forever. So no, you don't have to, and you may think you don't need to, but it lasts forever. The other thing that keeps us from being a good neighbor is judgment. We don't want to be neighbors with someone who doesn't look like us, act like us, think like us, behave like us, have the same political party as us. There's all sorts of reasons that we kind of divide out our social boundaries. I'll deal with them just that much. I'll tolerate them just enough. I'll be respectful, I'll be tolerant, but I'm not going to celebrate or do life with them. Part of that is because we are judging. And John talked about that so well last week, but just some of my thoughts on that is that we think that they don't deserve it. We're judging the choices they've made in the past. Maybe we think they don't need it, or we think we have nothing to offer. That holds us back too. It amazes me how many times someone comes into my office and they will tell me a story of something they have been through, and they think they are the only person that has been there. And I would even go as far as to say 10 out of 10, that's never true. And God does this cool thing in my life when I get to meet with people, is He'll have someone in my office one day that tells a story that a week ago someone else was going through and needed to hear that exact same thing. See, there are some things you have in common with everybody in this room. Everyone. There are some things you only have in common with a few people. And there are some things that you are just that unique about. But no matter what, we all have something in common with each other. And part of that is that we each have a story. And when we judge others and we think they have nothing to benefit from our story, or we think we have nothing to benefit from their story, There's something to learn from everyone, absolutely everyone, especially the people that you disagree with. I mean, look at the parable that Jesus is teaching. There's something to be benefited not only from being around a priest, not only from being around a Levite, but even the people that you've said your whole life you're not going to be around. There's something there. In this parable, it looks like mercy. Maybe some of us need to broaden our understanding of different things, or get a different perspective, or get over ourselves just a little more by investing in someone that we wouldn't normally do. But there's something from everyone. God has put something in everyone for them to offer you and for you to offer in return, regardless of if they're a little different than you. And the other thing that happens is we don't want to love our neighbors because we might get hurt. And I just want to go ahead and real quick clarify that. You will. You will, just in case you were wondering. If you make a decision to impact another life, you will get hurt. It will happen. You know, I get the God why questions here at the church, and sometimes we'll get an email that says how much they appreciate what we're doing here, which those are the best emails to get. And so sometimes it'll say, you know, I came from this other church and they hurt me so badly. I'm so excited to be at God why because I know this is a safe place. And I'm very quick to say, I am so excited you have started your journey here. I type it. But we will hurt you too. I just want to warn you, because we're a whole big group of humans, and we will do things. Now, we might be a little faster to apologize. We can apologize fairly well here. But we're human. We will hurt you. People have hurt you, and people will hurt you again. But if you withdraw yourself from that, you're missing out on the impact it can have on you and the impact you can have on others, on leaving a legacy, on doing something beyond yourself, getting out of your comfort zone, all because we've been hurt. I've seen people that have lived with 30 years of wounds and withdrawn because it's just easier. And it is. It's easier not to invest in people. It's especially easy to not invest in the ones that hurt you or that frustrate you or don't think like you. Because when they don't think like us, because we think normal and everyone else is crazy. I had coffee with a girl a couple weeks ago, and she said, no, I totally realize I'm crazy. I just hide it really well. And I said, I hope everybody understands that. We all think our vantage point is the norm. We're all crazy. We're all crazy. We're all the norm. Your vantage point isn't so unique, and everybody else is insane, and you're healthy. That's not what's happening. But what happens is when we take that step out and we realize, okay, maybe I've got stuff to work on, or maybe I've got something to offer, and then we get hurt and we withdraw back. And then time can go by pretty fast. You can spend 5 years and then you look back and you thought, you know, I used to be involved in other people's lives, and now I've just kind of gotten so consumed in my bubble that what happened to that time? Part of the reason we don't love our neighbors well is because we're busy, or we're judging, or we don't think they have anything to offer us, or we don't have anything to offer them. But also, it's because we might get hurt, because we've been hurt before. The other thing that we do, and this is probably the biggest one for me, as I look at my notes, this is like the biggest paragraph for me. Sal and I had an opportunity in college. Sal was part of an organization called Campus Crusade for Christ, and there was a couple that ran that organization on his campus, and their names were Jen and Tony. Now, Jen and Tony are like the biggest deal for me. They took Sal and I under their wing, and they had us over for dinner at their house, and we wanted to be in a marriage like Jen and Tony. We wanted to be parents like Jen and Tony. Jen and Tony were everything for us for a while. They had us over once a month right before we got married, as well as the year after, and the investment they made in us prompted us to make an investment later in others. In fact, for many, many years, they have been the reason I have done ministry. Because Jen and Tony invested in us, because they loved us, we loved others. So when we moved home, we decided to get involved in a church and start to invest in younger people, just like Jen and Tony had invested in us. And we did so for years and years. And then even when we moved churches, we decided we were going to invest in young adults, which got us super excited because that was the age in which Jen and Tony invested in us. And so we had people over to our house. We had them over for dinner. We did life with people. We had small groups. We even had them around our kids. Like, we just did everything Jen and Tony did because Jen and Tony loved us. That's why we loved others. And I was talking to one of my best friends on the phone, and I was telling her a frustration, because I felt like there was this individual that I had tried to invest in for months and months and months, maybe even years, and had given and given and given. And I felt like I had had multiple, counseling sessions with this person. I had invested financially in this person, helping this person out. I did all this stuff, and then I was watching them walk through life and realizing they weren't investing in anybody else. And so I was kind of venting to a friend of mine about that, and she said, Jen, it's almost as if you only want to love her if she'll love you back. Like you only scratch her back if she scratches yours. And I immediately was offended, which is what I do when I get offended. And I immediately was like, that's ridiculous. And then I said, well, we love so that others will pour back in. We're paying it forward, right? Like, I don't want anything from this individual. I'm set. I'm good. But I would like to know that their life is going to count to impact someone else. So I give so that they will give, and like later and down the road, right? Pay it forward, right? And so as I was driving home from the conversation where my friend offended me, I decided that I was going to tell God how I was correct and she was wrong. And so I started this conversation with God. I said, God, this is how I talk to God. You're going to get a glimpse into my car rides. So, ready? I have hands on the wheels. I'm not texting. And so I was like, God, that's why we do what we do. That's why I do ministry, so that others will love others. We love because Jen and Tony loved us. I love people because my mom loved me. I love young women because there are older women that mentor me that have poured into my life. Like, I love because they have loved me. And this is right, God. And my friend is wrong, horribly wrong. And so I just ranted, and I just said, God, we love because, and he stopped me in my tracks. And he wouldn't let me finish the sentence. Look at 1 John chapter 4, verses 19 through 21. It says, we love because he first loved us. Whoever claims to love God yet hates a brother or sister is a liar. For whoever does not love their brother and sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen. And he has given us this command: anyone who loves God must also love their brother and sister. So I was talking to God. I said, we love because, and the verse says, because he first loved us. No wonder I'm exhausted sometimes. No wonder I'm frustrated, because if I try and operate and love others out of my own capacity, I will always be tired. If I try and operate loving others because of what they may do for me or for someone else down the road, I'm missing that verse. We love because he first loved us, period. Not because of what they'll do or what they won't do. We don't withdraw love because they have hurt us. We don't withdraw love because they haven't paid us back appropriately. We don't withdraw love because they haven't changed. We love because he loves us. We're a friend because God is a friend first. We're a neighbor because God is a neighbor first, and no other reason. So some of us have spent years trying to love people, and we keep wondering, why does it seem to be getting us nowhere? See, I can't operate from a place of trying to love people in my capacity. I can't love from any other reason other than God loves me, period. And if I try and attach anything else to that, I will be tired. I will be frustrated. So that neighbor that you have in your mind, that neighbor that I asked you to think about earlier, that frustrates you from your office, from your school, maybe in your actual neighborhood, maybe even someone in the building today. If you are trying to love them from any other point other than the fact that God loves you, it won't work. It may sustain itself for a while, but eventually you will get tired. Eventually you will get frustrated because they might not pay it back the way that you want to. They might not treat you the way that you want to be treated. Now, I need to clarify. I'm not suggesting we love because he first loved us, so we should be doormats. Genuine and healthy love comes with boundaries. There's health in that. You should have boundaries. You should not enable people. It's a whole nother message, though. My point is that you need to love people because God first loved you. Now, the reason this is difficult for us at times is because we really like the reaping and sowing principle. It's a biblical principle. I've used it to justify a lot of my actions. Well, I will do for them if they do for me. That's right. You reap what you sow. You get what you give. What goes around comes around. Other traditions call it karma. It's so real that every major world religion has it as a theme somewhere in their tradition. And one day I was explaining, as I was defending again, God has to repeatedly kind of try and teach me. And I was explaining to God again why it was okay for me to be frustrated with people not treating me the way I wanted to be treated or not treating others the way I think they should be treated. And I was justifying that. Part of the reason was reaping and sowing. Why should I do for them? They need to have the weight of their consequences. And we do. They need to, they don't deserve love. They've done this to me, or they've done this to other people. So we hold ourselves back because they need to reap what they sow. Why should I scratch their back? They haven't scratched mine. And God has worked in my life, and continues to try, as much as I let him, to say, yes, reaping and sowing is real. That principle is real. But it is God's job to do the reaping and the sowing. And if I withdraw love from my neighbor because I feel like they should be punished or they should not get more, I'm trying to get in God's business. And as John repeatedly says, we need to be out of the God business. We love because he first loved us, period. And that stinks sometimes because it means it won't always be fair. It means you're going to reach out to your neighbor and you're going to try and help them, and they're not always going to come back to help you. Maybe not even come back to help anybody else. But that's not why we do it. See, the expert in the law was trying to clarify with this question. He was saying, okay, God, I'm okay, Jesus, teacher, rabbi. I'm okay that you want me to love others, but could you just explain to me which others? Because there might be some that I don't want to put in that category. I'd like to narrow this down as much as possible so I can love excellently. And Jesus said, which one did it right? The very one that the expert in the law would have had the hardest time with. Think about that person in your head. Maybe it's because, maybe you have a hard time loving them because you think they should reap what they sow. God always has a way to bring about our consequences from our choices, but it's God's job, not ours. And when we withdraw our love, we miss it, and we're trying to get up in God's business. Pastor Josh has a saying that I love. He says, what would it look like if we treated everyone like they went to our church? I mean, like people in the grocery store, people in your office, that person that's in your mind that you're really frustrated with. What would it look like if you treated everyone like they went here? Because generally when you see someone that goes to church, now I realize we're a little different because we don't have people stand up and raise their hand or anything like that. You can literally attend here for 8 years and do nothing and not be involved. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm teasing Karen right there. I mean, you can be as anonymous here as you want. But generally, once you get to know someone, especially if you get in a small group with someone, you wouldn't be in the grocery store and avoid them. You'd do the big Southern, hey, y'all, and you'd run up to them, how you been? You would talk to them, you would communicate with them. And what would life look like? Actually, how would our church grow? If we treated everyone as if they were a part of our life, if we treated everyone that we encountered, and see, for some of you right now, you're like, I could do that at the grocery store. I can treat the checkout person like that, or I can treat the person that serves me at a restaurant like that. Okay, that's good, and I want to encourage us to do that. But what about that person that's been in your mind that's frustrating you, that you work with, that gets on your nerves, that has hurt you or that you have hurt? What about that person? Can you treat them like you go to church with them? Like you're in a small group with them? Can you encourage and support them the same way in which you would someone you walk through life with in the church? A new thing I'm trying in my life is every morning I read the 23rd Psalm and I say it out loud to myself for many, many reasons. It's a great psalm. There's a lot in there. And verse 4 is one of my favorites. And it says, surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. I was reading that one morning and I got to thinking about the direction that entails. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me. Follow me. And I don't like boats because I'm scared of boats. But if not like the boat itself, I just don't like to be on water. That makes me nervous. Boats themselves don't scare me. But as a boat, just wanted to clarify because that's a weird phobia to have. Like, you're driving by, it's like, boat. That doesn't scare me. It's on the water that scares me, makes me nervous. Sorry, my 20-somethings are probably laughing at me right now. So when you're on the water, right, you guys have to say this for me because I don't really know because I try not to get on boats. But if you're in the water and your boat is going, you leave something behind you. It's called a wake. Am I right, boat people? Yes. So there is a wake behind you. Surely goodness and mercy will leave a wake behind you. Surely goodness and mercy will leave a flow behind you. They will follow you. See, when we first read that, we think, I'm so excited. I'm going to get goodness and mercy. It's going to follow me. No, it's what do you leave behind? As you love your neighbor, what wake are you leaving? As you come into that office situation that frustrates you, or that school situation that frustrates you, or maybe even that family situation, do you come in and leave a wake of goodness and mercy? Or do you drain the situation, leaving negativity, leaving wounds, leaving bitterness? What do you leave behind you as you walk? Because I struggle with that. Because we get busy, because we have judgments, because we don't think we have anything to offer, or they don't have anything to offer us. All these reasons that we've talked about this morning leave different kind of wakes. But if I operate from a capacity of what God has put inside me, and we love because He loves us, period, I will have an opportunity to leave a wake of goodness and mercy. I have an opportunity to leave a legacy of goodness and mercy. You know, we have this 100 days of impact, and we started with a question. From the book Stumbling Upon Happiness, we started with a question that altruism or giving or being generative, actually giving back to the community, would actually increase your happiness. And for many of you, I've talked to you, and this 100 days has actually done that. Doing daily things of encouragement, of giving back, has actually made a difference in your happiness. And I want us to continue with that question through the rest of the 100 days, but I want to take it to a deeper level this morning. Not only do I want you to think about giving back and impacting those that are, the little notes of encouragement, those that you would choose to impact, but what would it look like in our happiness, in our emotional and psychological health, and our spiritual health? What would it look like if we made a choice to impact those we have avoided impacting for so long? That we encouraged and supported those that have deemed us unworthy or we have deemed unworthy. What would we stumble upon then? If we stumble upon happiness just by doing nice things for others randomly, imagine if we intentionally sought to love better the people that are most difficult to love. I wonder what we'd stumble upon. If we just sent out that wake of goodness and mercy, if we just sent that forward, as opposed to avoiding, withdrawing, just operating and keeping those surface level relationships and not having to go that next step and investing in those that we have really struggled to value. As this next song comes up, it gives us an opportunity to think about all the different ways that it matters when we send it out, when we pay it forward. And as you listen to this song, I want to challenge you to listen with different ears. Because we hear that message and oftentimes we think, I'll just go do something nice for someone, or I'll give a monetary donation to someone who's in need. And your neighbors are in need, and that is very valuable. But I want you to listen to it, because what if we began to love because He loves us with no attachments, no contingencies, just because He loves us, regardless of our wounds, regardless of our fears, regardless of our doubts of our own worthiness or theirs, just because He loves us. Let's pray. Father, I thank You so much that You loved us first. Because Lord, if You didn't do that, I don't know how we will be able to love others. Because God, when I love out of my own capacity, I'm exhausted, I am frustrated. I notice what's being done against me. I notice what's not being done for others or what's not being done for me. I see all sorts of things, and I see them from the wrong perspective because I'm not just loving from how You have loved me. God, give me the Samaritan's eyes, that mercy would follow me, that goodness and love and compassion and grace would follow me. Help me love well. Help me to be a good neighbor. In Jesus' name, amen.